Hello and welcome to Global Business Report, live from Nigeria's capital, Abuja. I'm Folake Adesugba. In our top stories, Tito Mboweni sworn in as new South Africa finance minister. And the top finance officials convene in Indonesia and advise leaders against protectionism. Plus, Hurricane Michael cuts Gulf of Mexico oil production by 40% and natural gas output by 28%. In a move that was cheered by markets, the former South African Reserve Bank Governor Tito Mboweni returns to the cabinet for the first time since 1998. The South African rand and the country's bonds have gained. He replaces Nhlanhla Nene, who quit his job on Monday following his testimony at the State Capture Commission last Friday. Mboweni's first big task in government is to present the medium-term budget statement on the 24th of October this year, where he will reassure markets and credit rating agencies of SA's fiscal health. Well, for more on this, here in Arise Business correspondent Laurie Lade, who gave this update to my colleague India Asen. Let's have a listen.
It's interesting because there have been so many finance ministers in South Africa, 5 in the past 4 years, and usually the replacement at the top of the finance ministry, that transition, is something that doesn't happen all that smoothly. There's speculation that the finance minister may go. Remember when Pravin Gordhan was removed earlier this year? Late last year. It was rumored, speculated about for so very long. It was very, very unsettling for the market. But because Nhlanhla Nene, who had some undisclosed meetings with the Guptas, who are part of this corruption inquiry into Jacob Zuma, because he had undisclosed meetings with the Guptas, he stepped down himself. There was no uncertainty at the top of the finance ministry. Cyril Ramaphosa accepted his resignation and replaced Nane with another well-respected finance minister. So it happened very, very smoothly, which we haven't seen in South Africa for some time. That said, the markets that really reacted quite positively yesterday and also this morning, but there's been a bit of a sell-off over the past hour or so. The rand, which was up earlier this morning, down about 0.6 of a percentage point against the dollar. South African shares are down about 1.5%. So this relief rally seems to have petered out rather quickly.
Well, with that news in mind, can you tell us a little bit about the new finance minister, Mboweni?
Well, he is really, no matter how you look at it, a very well-qualified candidate. He was governor of the central bank in South Africa for almost 10 years until 2009. And through all of the transition, the turmoil that South Africa has been through, the central bank has managed to retain its independence. It's retained its respect both internationally and with the general public. So the central bank really is one of the few institutions in South Africa that hasn't been tainted by corruption. So having a pedigree at the central bank is certainly a selling point. The markets are very pleased with this new candidate. He was also labor minister under Nelson Mandela, yet he was never had a very senior post within the ANC. So he's a step removed from the infighting that has damaged the African National Congress for so many years. So he really is a very well-respected candidate. And for someone who's an ex-central banker, has quite a degree of name recognition with the general public. He's a prolific user of social media, and over the past year has posted pictures of him on travels throughout Africa. More recently, eating chilies in various places, and he's posted photographs of himself bursting out in a sweat after eating chilies. This has become a popular meme that's been circulated all over social media. So he has a great deal of name recognition that most central bankers do not have. But in that sense, he's known and well-liked by the general public. He's also very well respected by the financial markets and international investors.
Well, Laurie, it's great to hear that, he's very well qualified and relatable, as you've said. But you also mentioned that, of course, the finance minister position has been quite unstable for the last 4 to 5 years. So is Mbweni the man to solve South Africa's economic problem now?
I think that it's probably a job that will take more than one man, and it will take a period of time. And I think there probably is a fear that, and this may be why the markets are selling off today, because there isn't another fundamental reason out there for the sell-off. I think there's a realization that South Africa's economic problems are so deep-rooted that they can't be repaired by a sticking plaster. There needs to be root and branch change in the South African economy and in the South African civil society for economic gains to really be embedded. When Cyril Ramaphosa came to the presidency, I think there was some probably misplaced optimism over what he could do economically. Also, a man who was very well respected by the public, very well respected by the international markets because of his experience as a mining executive. So he was a man who could both relate to the general public and speak the language of business. But I think the realization crept in that the African National Congress is to a certain extent hemmed in what it can do because the party is not united. And South Africa's problems are so very deep-rooted, as I mentioned, starting from the poor state of the education system. So things that need to be affected cannot be affected this financial year or next financial year. Improving the educational system from primary all the way up so that young South Africans are prepared for the job market is something that cannot be addressed overnight.
That was Arise business correspondent Laurie Lade speaking to my colleague India Asian. Now, after ousting the repressive Robert Mugabe almost a year ago, following more than 3 decades in power, and peacefully electing President Emmerson Mnangagwa in July, many Zimbabweans hoped the country would emerge from turmoil and return to prosperity. Instead, it appears to be imploding in the days since the new finance minister announced a stabilization program. Over the weekend, long lines for fuel reappeared, sometimes stretching for several kilometers.
And I think somebody should be made accountable. In this case, our government.
I'm here on this queue which I followed for almost 1.5 years. I'm not sure if I'm not going to get anything.
Prices are ridiculous. They are too much. And ordinary men like me, from the street, I don't think in the next week or so I can afford it. Because take for instance a 2 liter of cooking oil is costing $10. Would I be able to manage that? That means I'm going to eat food without cooking oil.
We have a disease in the country called fiscalitis. This is the disease of a government just spending money as if money grows on trees. Now we've got domestic debt that is bigger than external debt. Now we've got a budget deficit that is over 30% of GDP. So we have to cut expenditure.
Well, elsewhere, China is funding massive infrastructure project in Africa. Angola has secured $2 billion from the China Development Bank for infrastructure projects. That is according to Angola State newspaper reports today. Financial analysts are raising concerns about Angola's growing debt burden, which the government said earlier this year will rise to $77.3 billion by the end of 2018. Angola, Africa's second largest oil producer, is in the process of trying to diversify its economy since a fall in the price of crude in 2014 plunged it into recession. Inflation rate stands at more than 20% per year. You're watching the Global Business Report on Arise News. Time for a short break now, but plenty more still ahead, including Nigeria's federal government proposes new minimum wage. We'll bring you the details when we return. Stay with us.
Nigeria. We are 198 million productive people with over 900,000 square kilometers of fertile land. Nigeria's banking system has emerged strong and resilient from the 2016 crisis, which has enhanced our productivity in agribusiness and manufacturing. Come, invest in Nigeria's agribusiness, manufacturing, and value-added mining. Enjoy the Central Bank of Nigeria-led initiatives in funding interventions, stabilized exchange rate, friendly capital repatriation regime, and many more. The Central Bank of Nigeria's robust monetary policy and interventions under President Buhari's administration had positioned the economy to target and attain a GDP growth of 6% with a strong and growing external reserves. Come, invest in Nigeria. Nigeria, ready for business.
There's an old saying in Nigeria, thoughts and dreams are the foundation of our being. At First Bank, we dare to dream and strive to innovate, continuing our over 120-year tradition to be the first to offer new products and services to our customers. You first, First Bank.
Welcome back to Global Business Report. I'm Folake Adesugba. Now, the world's biggest trading houses say oil prices may not fall below $65 per barrel and possibly breaking above $100 next year due to U.S. sanctions on Iran. Meanwhile, the rise in oil price signifies increased revenue for oil-producing countries, but regrettably, Nigeria may not benefit from this largesse. While countries with higher refining capacity may reap the gains of increased oil prices, some could not be said of Nigeria, as the country is heavily dependent on imported petroleum products due to the poor state of the country's refineries. According to reports, Nigeria's 2018 budget benchmark maintains $51 per barrel, while production was at 1.97 million barrels per day. While rising oil prices are welcomed by oil producers, consumers might not be that excited, as higher crude price mean potential increase in petrol pump price. And Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has asked lawmakers to approve the issuance of a $2.79 billion Eurobond in a letter which was read in the upper chamber of Parliament. He said he wanted the Eurobond to be issued in the international capital market for the implementation of new external borrowing that had already been approved in the 2018 budget to help finance the budget deficit and to fund infrastructure projects. Well, an independent economist, Ayo Toriba, and oil and gas expert, Bala Zaka, deliberate on this. Let's have a look.
Nigeria's liquidity shortage or the shortfalls in revenue emanated from the export shortfall. The collapse of the oil price meant that our export revenue dropped to below half of what we had been used to. It made sense for Nigeria to seek foreign currency inflow. You have a range of options. Eurobonds is just one option. And the Nigerian government had, since the beginning of 2017, issued several rounds, of Eurobonds. The very first issue was a request for 1 billion that was oversubscribed eightfold.
Okay.
I think after that, we've seen 2.5 billion, 3 billion, and now the current one. So looking for foreign exchange inflow is a good idea. But placing all your eggs in a single basket of Eurobonds is not a good idea. At the end of the day, Eurobonds are debt instruments. You are borrowing long term. It costs you money. You have to service it. And one day you will repay it. So going again and again, so we were well received at our first attempt, eightfold subscription. We shouldn't make the market tired of Nigeria. We should explore other options for raising foreign resource inflows. And in particular, rather than doing debt, we should explore equity options, like foreign direct investment. And we should also exploit diaspora bonds. And I don't think we should be issuing long-term Eurobonds to meet budget shortfalls. We'll be better off looking at the local market, issuing treasury bills to meet budget shortfalls.
But what were the benefits of the last Eurobond to the Nigerian economy?
Stability.
Stability.
That's right, yes. Before we issued the first 1 billion, which we eventually took 1.5 billion, the Naira was under pressure. It started losing value from mid-2016. By early February 2017, we were talking about 520 Naira to a dollar in the parallel market. We successfully issued the first Eurobond, and governments used that to stabilize the market, and subsequent ones were similarly used to stabilize the market. Then portfolio inflows followed, and that has, strengthened the Naira from 520 to 360 to the dollar. So the role of the previous Eurobond issues was to stabilize the foreign exchange market, which was very good. Nigeria needed that. Yes, we started issuing the bonds, and then the oil price itself also rose, adding further to the increase in reserves. So you had us issuing bonds, you had the portfolio investors bringing their own funds, you had us earning more from the improvement in the oil price, and the reserves have surged, from less than 30 billion US dollars to close to 50 billion US dollars now. So the role of the Eurobonds was that it brought stability as expected. Okay. If Eurobonds borrowing other people's funds could help you stabilize the foreign exchange market, getting your own money through equity issuance, particularly attracting foreign direct investment into infrastructure by privatizing part of government ownership in infrastructure, will stabilize the foreign exchange market further. And that's going to be permanent. You don't repay equity. You are going to repay the Eurobonds. You don't service equity, you service the Eurobonds. So it's better to seek equity by privatizing and getting foreign direct investment, as we have foreign direct investment in LNG, in telecom sector. That's more stable. That's
very, very strong points, Ayo. And that brings me to my next question. You mentioned the rising oil prices. How realistic is Nigeria's budgetary oil price at $51 per barrel compared with the world output?
Well, as at the time it was placed or planned, at $51 per barrel, it was realistic. Yeah. Because we have to remember that when you talk about crude oil and gas...
But it's 2018 budget.
Yes. You're talking about an international commodity. Sure. And there are so many things that have to do with the interplay, that lead to prices. So you have interplays of activities that are beyond Nigeria. And if you are dealing with an international commodity whose prices are based on externalities, you have to be conservative. So as at that time, or when that plan was made, it was realistic. And remember, just before that time, we were experiencing what we can best describe as global glut. Yeah. But just after that, we are happy. The price has gone up now, compared to the $51 per barrel that we projected, for our budget. We now have what we call a positive differential. Personally, I'm happy that we have a positive differential. The question now is, what are we going to do with the positive differential?
So what do you think we're going to do with this positive differential?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we've always known that as far as oil revenues are concerned, we generate the revenues. But when it comes to GDP, we are not doing much. Because when you analyze very well, you'll be surprised to find out that our population is even growing at a higher rate compared to our GDP. That tells you something is fundamentally wrong. The revenues we're getting, fantastic, but the question is this: we have to move away, diversify, and do something so that we have streams of revenues. Then within the oil and gas industry also, what are we doing to internally domesticate the distillates that will come from the oil we are going to have or the crude oil we are going to refine. So when we put all this together with a positive differential, I think Nigeria will be on a good pedestal.
But this positive differential doesn't really look good, I mean, for consumers, because at the end of the day, you know, the oil prices are going to increase the price of fuel at the pumps.
Fantastic question. The only reason why we have that is because it is the kind of model we are using for that sector of the economy. Remember, when you talk about an economy can be a privatized economy, a commercialized economy, a deregulated economy, you know? So when you look at it like that, and it could also be a commercialized economy. As Nigeria stands today, when we only concentrate on that model we use for the Nigerian oil and gas industry, I think everybody will be right to say that we are not gaining, whether the prices of crude oil go up or they come down. And these are the practical reasons. When the prices of crude oil is down or are down, we suffer because that is the oxygen of Nigerian revenue. Exactly. And that simply means we will not be generating much revenue because we depend so much on revenues from crude oil.
Moving ahead, the Nigerian government has proposed 24,000 naira as the new minimum wage for civil servants. Christian Gige, Minister of Labour, disclosed this while briefing State House correspondents after the weekly Federal Executive Council meeting. He said after the Nigeria Labour Congress called off the nationwide strike, it agreed to 30,000 naira as minimum wage for workers in the public sector and 25,000 naira for their counterparts in the private sector. However, Ngige made it clear that the government would be able to afford 24,000 naira. Elsewhere, British Prime Minister Theresa May, while speaking to Parliament, says she's working towards a deal with the EU and urged members to rise above party lines and back it in the national interest. She added that the rights of European Union citizens residing in the United Kingdom would be ensured whether Britain leaves with or without a deal. May is speaking ahead of a crucial EU summit next week in Brussels. EU leaders say major progress is needed at next week's summit to ensure a deal is finalized before Britain leaves on the 29th of March.
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, as she knows, first of all, as part of the negotiations with the European Union, we have already come to agreements about the rights that will be available to those EU citizens who are living here in the United Kingdom already. We have set out very clearly what will be the situation for those who come to the United Kingdom during the implementation period. And I also was able to update people a few weeks ago to make clear that in a no-deal arrangement as well, we will also ensure that we look after those EU citizens who have come here and made their home here. As for the individual case, I'm sure that the Department for Work and Pensions will be looking into this in some detail. Can I simply say to my right honourable and learned friend, what we are working to is to ensure that we get a good agreement for the United Kingdom, an agreement which delivers on the vote that the people took in the referendum to leave the European Union, to bring an end to the jurisdiction of the European Court, to bring an end to free movement, to bring an end to sending vast sums of money every year to the European Union, that does it in a way that protects jobs, that ensures no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. I would hope that when we come back, we're working for that deal. When we come back with a deal, I would hope that everybody across this whole House will put the national interest first, that everybody across this whole House will look not only at a good deal for the future of the United Kingdom, but will also remember that having given the decision as to whether we stay in the European Union or not to the British people having voted to leave, it is our duty to ensure that we...
You are watching the Global Business Report on Arise News here. Time for a short break now, but there's still plenty more ahead, including Chinese internet giant loses its spot as one of the world's 10 biggest companies. We'll bring you the details shortly. Stay with us.
There is nothing as symbolic as a door. It shuts to protect you and opens to give you much more. everyone wants to succeed. Not just count pennies. When life gets tough, I remember a few things. Difficulty and struggles are part of what life brings. Your strength comes from the support around you. A true friend believes in what you do, there to hold your hand through any weather. I found my partner, and we walked through doors together.
Diamond, your bank.
In a fast-paced world, you need the ability to make everything move at your own speed. Stay ahead and not miss anything. That's why I'm on More Life Complete, which lets me call everyone in Nigeria on all networks at just 15 kobo per second. You can also call any line in the United States, Canada, UK, Germany, India, China, and Malaysia too, at just 15 kobo per second. And just when you think life can't get any easier, I get 15 free minutes to call anyone in the 9 Mobile family.
Just booked your ticket to London.
Before you think I've got to compete on More Life, I also get 15 minutes free browsing to catch up on sports updates and anything online. Now that's what I call the complete package.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Welcome back to Global Business Report. I'm Folake Adesugba. Now, bad news for Tencent as the Chinese internet giant has lost its spot as one of the world's 10 biggest companies, enabling ExxonMobil to knock it out. After shedding more than $200 billion in market value this year, Tencent has been replaced by ExxonMobil in the top of the rankings based on market capitalization. When its share price hit a record high in January, the Shenzhen-based company was in the top 5 along with Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft and Amazon.com by the end of January 2018. Tencent, which is 31% owned by SHGSE-listed Naspers, returned more than 67,000% from its initial public offering IPO. The tech company turned south this year on a run of bad news, including a rare drop in profit and a regulatory crackdown on gaming in China. Well, our Asia business correspondent Sandy Hong has all the latest business news making headlines in Asia. Let's have a look.
That's right. Asia shares are continuing a bit of a downturn after a pretty dismal start to the week. Here in Singapore, shares hit their lowest since September 19. Financials were the top losers, with DBS shedding 1.1%. Sentiments are bruised after the IMF said risks to the global financial system could increase sharply if pressures in emerging markets escalate or global trade tensions deteriorate. In Australia, financials are also the main drag, but gains in healthcare stocks capped losses. In Japan, the Nikkei closed slightly up. Firms with large exposure to China continue to slide. Shares in China were also in and out of the negative today. Blue chip extending losses into a third straight day. The Shanghai Composite closed up 0.2%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng was up 0.4%. Overall, pretty low sentiments across the board today, and with uncertainty still prevailing in markets across the world, many investors are choosing to stay on the sidelines.
While zooming in down under, it's a pretty tough week for the Australian financial sector. We have the country's top lender being slapped with a lawsuit, and it faces heavy scrutiny ahead of a committee hearing later in the week. What can you tell us?
Absolutely. The lawsuit couldn't have come at a worse time. There's already a lot of nervousness in the banking sector this week. Some of the most high-profile executives are scheduled to appear before a parliamentary committee this week, where they'll be grilled over their business conduct. Commonwealth Bank of Australia's Matt Coman, who took over the role in April, is first one up, and he's going to have some pretty tough questions to answer. CBA has been hit with a class action suit seeking damages of more than $71 million. The bank is accused of investing the retirement savings of thousands of customers into low-returning products. During public hearings, CBA already admitted that it sold insurance to tens of thousands of customers who were not eligible to claim against it, and took fees out of debt client accounts and double charging interest to thousands of customers due to a coding error. The lawsuit is the seventh against a major financial firm stemming from the Royal Commission misconduct inquiry, which has revealed systematic malpractice. Australia's top financial firms have had already $30 billion wiped off their market value this year as a result of that inquiry. And the law firm that sues CBA says it would actually launch a series of class actions against the country's largest banks and wealth managers. So the sector could face even more legal troubles in the coming months.
Oh no, that doesn't look good right now for the Australian financial sector. But we're moving on to corporate news now, Sandy. Google is grabbing the spotlight today with the tech giant unveiling its much anticipated new phone. What's so special about it? And Sandy, most importantly, are people buying?
That's right. Lots of chatters about the Google Pixel 3. The new phone comes in two sizes and is part of the latest lineup to compete with Apple and Samsung. Google says the camera on the new phone has technology that is, quote, generations ahead of other phones. But the big talking point is around its AI technology. Google described the product as the first phone that can answer the phone. The new feature will answer calls, request information about the nature of the call, and share it as text with recipients. Google is also making a push into hardware, launching a new smart speaker and its first tablet computer called the Pixel Slate, which is aimed at competing with Apple's iPad Pro. But investors don't seem all that impressed. Shares of Alphabet have barely moved on the announcement. Pixel phones have previously been a tough sell, actually, launching with glitches and garnering less than 1% of the global market by shipments. And tech researchers say that Google did not actually change enough in the Pixel 3 for it to really stand out from its more well-known competitors. So while there is a lot of hype about the new gadgets, it still remains to be seen how much customers will bite.
Thank you, Sandy, because I was wondering about the aspect of artificial intelligence. If that's all there is that is new to the phone, then it isn't that different from the one before. Well, speaking of AI, new reports today revealed that Amazon's recruiting engine did not like women. I'm very curious to know what that's about, so tell us.
Yes, we all know that automation has been key to Amazon's e-commerce success, and the company has been using AI to hire talents as well. For the last 4 years, Amazon have been building computer programs to screen resumes of job applicants. The program ranked candidates from 1 to 5 stars. The idea is to sort out the top candidates quickly from a big pool of applicants, but the company realized later that its new system was not gender neutral when it comes to candidates for technical jobs. That's because the program were trained by observing patterns in resumes submitted over a 10-year period. Most of them came from men. That's a reflection of male dominance across the tech industry. As a result, the system taught itself that male candidates were preferable. It penalizes resumes that included the words women, as in women's chess club captain or all women's colleges, things like that. Amazon later edited the programs to make them more neutral to these terms, but there was no guarantee that it wouldn't devise other ways to sort candidates which could become discriminatory. So the company ultimately disbanded the team that designed the programs and said that it is committed to workplace diversity and equality. But there is still an ongoing push for AI in hiring processes among many top firms. Goldman Sachs and LinkedIn are among many companies that have actually created their own resume screening tools that try to match candidates. Experts say that they'll obviously still have a long way to go in ensuring that the algorithm is fair.
Well, with any development, there's always glitches. When it comes to diversity, though, I know that that could really, really affect a company like Amazon. Another talk of the town now, Sandy, is SoftBank. So apparently, sources are saying that the Japanese group is in talks to buy a majority stake in shared office provider WeWork. But what are the risks of putting so many eggs in the same basket?
Well, it's definitely going to be a really big holding if the deal goes through. Up to $20 billion. That's the amount SoftBank could be investing for the stake in WeWork. Wow. SoftBank already owns about 20% of the company. It injected $4.4 billion last year into the growing collection of millennial-friendly offices. About a third of that money went into subsidiaries seeking to branch out in China, Japan, Southeast Asia, and Korea. But WeWork have been actually treated with a lot of skepticism by some investors who see the company as an overvalued real estate play, which is vulnerable to a property market downturn. One major WeWork challenge is that there is little to stop copycats. It therefore has to spend a lot of money to grow quickly and lock down prime locations with long-term capitalized leases. Another $20 billion, of course, from SoftBank would provide plenty of firepower, but burning through cash is no guarantee for success. And for SoftBank, the deal would be a shift from its more common practice of taking minority stakes in high-profile late-stage startups. And a large holding could actually end up compromising the company's tech-focused vision fund. That could be a very scary amount of concentration risk. And it seems that the market is actually already feeling not so optimistic about the potential deal. SoftBank shares tumbled 4.5% today to a one-month low and posted the biggest daily percentage drop in nearly 2 years.
Arise Asia business correspondent Sandy Wong there discussing the latest business news making headlines in Asia early on. All right, you're watching Global Business Report. There's still plenty more ahead, including central bankers and finance officials counsel leaders over protectionism. We'll have the details after the break. Stay with us.
As a fashion writer, I know how quickly trends are created and changed. In business, it's no different. To stay ahead, I needed a plan flexible enough to meet my changing communication needs. More Business 2.0 didn't just give me voice and data in one package. I got a whole lot more. With More Business, setting up my website was no problem. But I'm not just a fashion writer. I also own a home decor store before I decided to open an accessory store. With my customized More Business plan, managing my staff's communication is easy, no matter how frequently they come or they go. With 9mobile's new online self-service this week, I could adapt my plans to include this.
From 2,000 Naira, choose a business bundle, customize your staff's voice and data lines, and enjoy a variety of add-on business services. Dial *200*5# now to subscribe. More Business.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. In today's fast-moving, fast-changing world, you need a financial partner that understands your unique expectations. A bank with presence in major financial centers across the world, with the enabling platform to facilitate seamlessly whenever, wherever, however. A bank with best-in-class financial solutions from a superb combination of technology and human touch. For easy, fast, and secure banking that creates real value. Turning dreams into reality is now in your hands. People, technology, service. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
Welcome back to Global Business Report. I'm Folake Adesugba. Now, Hurricane Michael, which is strengthened into a Category 4 storm, has hit the Florida Panhandle region today. Its wind speed has risen to 155 miles per hour. Meteorologists say it is the strongest hurricane to hit the Florida Panhandle in record history. The storm has already cut Gulf of Mexico oil production by 40% and natural gas output by 28%. Regional ports have closed and more than 230 flights have been cancelled. Corporations expect as many as 200,000 power outages. And central bankers and finance officials gathered in Indonesia for this week's annual meetings of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank Group are pointing to trade as an important engine of growth. They're also urging leaders not to apply the brakes through protectionism.
Trade wars are stupid. Trade wars are not something easy to win. Trade wars are very difficult to fight, and they impoverish everybody. They are a major risk to the world growth, and this is why we cannot accept that protectionism is an issue. We must stick to the multilateral order. Of course, we need to fix it.
Trade expansion we were expecting this year, our first estimate was around 4.4%. We already revised it down to 3.9. Next year it was going to be 4. Now we revised it down to 3.7. And some people, I hear it sometimes, people saying, well, but all these things are happening, but the economy is still good. Of course it's still good because the impact is not there yet. Yeah. There is a delay between the moment when you introduce these measures and when they're actually affecting the economy. And I think we may see more of that kind of impact in the future if we don't do anything about it.
Some say that Europe is the problem. I say that Europe is a solution. Some say that multilateralism is a problem. Multilateralism is a solution. But to convince from that, we need to have a better Europe and a better multilateralism.
William Arkman has said his activist hedge fund Pershing Square Capital Management has built roughly $900 million position in Starbucks Corporation, betting the world's biggest coffee chain can overcome stagnant sales in its home market. Arkman's unveiling of a 1.1% stake in Starbucks comes as the Seattle-based company is trying to convince investors it can fend off heavy competition from rivals, including fast food chains and high-end coffee shops. Last month, it announced a reorganization that includes leadership changes and job losses. While activist shareholders are known to pick fights with chief executives and corporate boards, Arkman sounded a conciliatory tone as he unveiled Pershing Square's investment at the Grants Fall 2018 conference in New York. Well, earlier, my colleague India Asian spoke to our U.S. correspondent Celia Duncan. She began by asking her the latest on Nikki Haley's resignation, as well as all the latest business news making headlines in the United States. Let's have a look.
Well, the announcement that Nikki Haley is resigning from the position of U.S. ambassador to the United Nations came on Tuesday as Haley sat beside President Trump in the Oval Office. And of course, there's a lot of speculation over her departure. The former South Carolina governor and the highest profile woman in Trump's cabinet didn't give a specific reason for her decision to leave, but President Trump said Haley told him some 6 months ago that she was thinking of leaving by the end of the year to take a little time off. Haley described her 18-month stint at the UN as, quote, an honor of a lifetime, and quickly shot down rumors about a potential run for president in 2020, saying she would surely not be a candidate but would support Trump's re-election bid. Now, Trump had nothing but praise for Haley, saying she has done calling her incredible, saying she's done an incredible job, and calling her fantastic and somebody that just gets it. Haley, of course, is the latest in a long line of high-profile departures from the administration. Former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was fired in March, and Steve Bannon, Trump's chief strategist, left in August of last year. Now, as for who's taking her place, well, that's something else we don't know as yet. A few names being floated around include Trump's former Deputy National Security Advisor Dina Powell, U.S. Ambassador to Germany Richard Granow, And Twitter had been abuzz with speculation that the president's daughter and senior advisor Ivanka Trump could step into the role, but she's put speculation to rest, tweeting, quote, "It's an honor to serve in the White House alongside so many great colleagues, and I know that the president will nominate a formidable replacement for Ambassador Haley. That replacement will not be me."
Well, Nikki is definitely living on a good note, Leah, but President Trump is still reiterating threats to slap additional tariffs on China. This trade war seems unending, Leah, but what's the latest on that front?
Yes, it sure seems like it. That's right. The president on Tuesday repeated his threat to slap tariffs on an additional $267 billion of Chinese imports, and that's if Beijing retaliates for the recent levies the U.S. has imposed. Now, speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, Trump also emphasized that China is not ready to reach a deal on trade. The president said, quote, "China wants to make a deal, and I say they're not ready yet. We've canceled a couple of meetings because I say they are not ready to make a deal." However, some signs of encouragement from China today. A Chinese finance ministry official telling Reuters that he felt a little bit more optimistic on the prospect of breaking an impasse in trade negotiations with Washington. The official, who spoke on the sidelines of the annual IMF and World Bank meetings that are going on in Bali this week, said both sides are too economically integrated to tolerate a fallout. An opinion piece published today in a widely read Chinese tabloid said the U.S. wants to be the only winner in its conflict with China, an approach that history shows is full of risks. It also added that it's also unrealistic for China to seek an overwhelming victory over the United States. Now, separately, soybeans are facing some additional pressure today in the wake of potential new tariffs. Chicago soybean futures falling for a second day as expectations of a bumper U.S. crop, as well as those concerns around trade, weighing on the oilseed market. The corn market, meanwhile, weighing Trump's decision to end a ban on summer sales of gasoline with 15% ethanol. The move has been seen as designed to reassure farmers hurt by the U.S.-China trade dispute and who have long sought some relief for corn-based ethanol.
Yeah, I want to talk about the IMF now, because we know earlier this week the fund came out to cut the formerly predicted growth rate from 3.9 to 3.7%. But now the IMF has spoken again, saying that the fund, the trade tensions between the U.S. and China could basically lead to a global crisis. So tell us more on that front.
Well, the International Monetary Fund says that risks to the global financial system have risen, actually, over the past 6 months and could increase sharply if pressures on emerging markets escalate, or if, as you mentioned there, the global trade relations deteriorate further. The warning comes as the IMF holds its meetings this week. Now, the fund also noted that while the banking system has been shored up by regulators since the 2008 financial global crisis, easy financial conditions are contributing to high debt levels and stretched valuations, and new bank resolution regimes meant to avoid future bailouts are largely untested. Now, that's according to the fund's biannual Global Financial Stability Update. The update also said that market participants appear complacent about the risk of a sharp tightening in financial conditions. The fund's capital markets director said potential shocks to the system could come in many different forms, such as higher than expected inflation that triggers a sharp jump in interest rates, or a disorderly exit by Britain from the United Kingdom.
I don't know if you remember when Kylie Jenner tweeted, and they lost a lot of users and a lot of money on Snapchat. But anyway, we're going over to the midterm elections now. They're fast approaching, Leah, and U.S. voter registration is getting a boost from a particular pop star. What's going on with that?
Well, we're talking about pop superstar Taylor Swift. The nonprofit site vote.org, which helps people register online, reported 240,000 new registrations since Swift posted a message on Instagram over the weekend endorsing 2 Democratic candidates in her home state of Tennessee and urging people to register. Now, that's almost equal to the number of new registrants for all of August and September. Now, there's no real way of measuring Swift's direct impact, but about 102,000 of the registrations since Sunday were among voters between 18 and 29 years old. So it seems likely that they were prompted by that post from Swift. And her reach is enormous. She has 112 million Instagram followers. So this really underscores the way that celebrities can leverage their online presence. And you talked about Kylie Jenner there with Snap by sending messages instantaneously to their millions of fans. Swift said she's endorsing the Democratic candidates in her home state because of several hot-button issues, including gay rights and equal pay for women.
Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Report. Do stay with us on the channel. I'm Folake Adesugba. As always, be sure to tweet at us. We'd love to hear from you. But for now, that's goodbye.